Hi, folks. Welcome back to On Call with Insignia, where we go on call with leaders innovating the future of Southeast Asia's internet and digital economy, or as we like to call it, Asia Innovation. I'm your host, Paolo Aquino. And with us on this episode is the COO of Verihubs, Vivi Mandasari. So, for those who are hearing about Verihubs for the first time, we've actually had the CEO, Rick, and CTO, Willem, on the show in the past seasons. We'll make sure to link those in the podcast description, or you can check them out if you're watching YouTube and check those calls out, check those conversations out. But if it's your first time tuning in, learning about Verihubs, so they do verification, authentication, data processing for different businesses, and they're based out of Indonesia. And they've primarily focused a lot on fintechs and banking institutions. But I'm interested to talk now to Vivi, who's the COO, to learn more about how they're sort of expanding that and how they've sort of evolved the solution from the last time that I talked to Willem and Rick. So yeah, great to have you here on the show, Vivi. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for to have me to join in Insignia podcast.
It's great to have you on. And for our listeners to get to know you a little bit, I would love for you to be able to share with us how you decided to join, Verihubs. I understand you were doing like a couple of like BD roles in the past, digital marketing, all that stuff. So how did you decide, or how did Rick convince you to join Verihubs? And maybe you can even share like what your first few days were like.
So back to the 2019, the William offered me to join Verihubs becoming a BD. It was a very hard decision because it's really different to my background, but I believe AI is a future. At that time, 2019 is the most challenging days for my career. Meeting here and there and introduce and convincing AI technology, it's not easy because the market is not ready enough to adapt the AI. And then in 2020, pandemic hit our country, Indonesia. It's more challenging to us to meet other people in offline. But the pandemic is also changed our business. The AI more easily because they need to switch from offline to online. And gratefully, we're blessed we can hit trusted 100 of the companies that trust in us and more aggressively to get some big fish of the company.
Yeah, so now you work with, from those days in 2019, you mentioned it was Willem who actually invited you to join as BD. And obviously, there was a lot of, I guess, market education to let people know about this like AI powered kind of solution to speed things up when it came to, especially I think KYC processes, and to avoid things like fraud, which is like the whole story behind Verihubs, right? And now you mentioned there are hundreds of customers now, and you've also leveled up yourself as a leader from BD manager, now you're COO. So maybe you can share a little bit what's different now that you're COO versus from when you started at Verihubs as business development manager.
So in the Verihubs, the AI businesses is increasing massively. Verihubs also decided to build a good foundation of the company, not only the infrastructure, but also the organization structure itself. So the BOD also think how to improve the organization structure. Because in a small startup like us, all the things is due by one man show. You know what I mean? When in the BD, I also do some finance, legals, compliance, and marketing also. So because of the things that I have learned about the Verihubs in the beginning, the BOD called me to becoming a CEO of the Verihubs.
When you say BOD, you're referring to the board of directors.
Yeah.
Just for our listeners, right? So they understand as well. And so, given that you grew into this role as COO, maybe you can describe a little bit more about what you do as COO in Verihubs, especially with respect to, the company's mission and vision.
If we describe the COO in the Verihubs, it should be a very hard and agile person because the regulatory is quite changing massively. So we need to adapt it faster. And we should prioritize about the safety and reliability of our services. Even small mistakes in every choices, because it will be fatal for our clients' business securities and our reputation itself. If you ask me how to become a role CEO for the Verihubs, it's like I'm becoming a Asian parent in the company. I need to always say to our team please listen what is the best for clients and also best from us, because all the things it can be impact us and for the clients itself.
So making sure that there's order and making sure everybody's doing their job properly. That tracks definitely. We've had conversations with a number of other COOs on the show, and like they also share similar sort of definitions of what they do, right? Like it's really making sure the organization is doing processes properly, everybody's
Yeah.
compliant, right? And everybody's like protected as well in what they're doing, right? And you mentioned earlier that the industry is changing so fast, right? And part of your role is to keep up with the changes. So maybe you can talk about those changes as well, right? Like what are the trends that you see, especially moving from 2022 to this year when it comes to the identity verification market, right? Have you seen any changes in terms of like the spending or the demand on these types of solutions?
Like I said before, the trends is significantly changes always. But in 2023, now we shifting from the pandemic to endemic. But fortunately, the AI demand is not decreased, because when they already adapt the AI, all the things they want to adapt it more. Example, if we have a one banking solution that use our AI, all the banks come to us to, how can I get that services too? A surprising fact that market demand from the online world has not changed, tend to be stable and growing. WVO business returning, maybe we cannot reveal now, but some of the business from many offices and educational, they are looking for us to pay attention to using our AI. They do like face recognition to come into the office, and then for the attendance, and so the use cases of the AI is not more about the verification itself, but it's also growing right now.
To sort of reiterate what you mentioned, so you're saying that it's going beyond the initial sort of customer segment that you're initially targeting, which are like the banks, right? Like you're also seeing use cases, post-pandemic use cases, right? Because now that people are going back to the office, going back to school and whatnot, you're seeing a lot of other types of businesses that are looking at, especially the facial recognition kind of use case for Verihubs. So I think that's really interesting, hearing like how things initially started with the company and sort of what you're exploring now. And it's good to know that these kinds of solutions are still they're not really tied or dependent on the whole pandemic effect, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to digitalization. And speaking of all these different use cases, you mentioned a couple of them, right? From banks all the way to offices and KYC verification, all the way to facial recognition. From your perspective, what are the most important use cases or market segments for Verihubs moving forward?
Currently, our technology is mostly needed by financial institution or fintech. Bank to fintech startup using our technology as one of the main backbones in order to build a safe and confidentially digital financial ecosystem for the stakeholders. Maybe people know it for the KYC or eKYC. But as I mentioned earlier, we also adapt to other industries. We have some kind of use case for the hospitality and for educational. So our products is more adaptive for the others industry right now. But for the main point, the use cases is still for KYC, because it's really reliable for the security, because all the things that we created is to prevent all your users is a real person.
And so you also mentioned about how regulation is constantly, evolving as well in Indonesia, especially when it comes to data privacy. I think it was only like last year or 2021 when Indonesia came out with its own latest data privacy act, right? So maybe you can share a little bit about that whole regulation piece and how that has impacted the business at Verihubs.
To be honest, we didn't have to adapt much when data privacy regulation in Indonesia were enforced, because we already complied for it. We always writing in our contract to the clients or to the end user in our term and condition. We always said it clearly. We strictly to create a high security to your and privacy. So it's not really impacted to us actually.
And another thing I also wanted to talk about is that Verihub Solutions have actually received several certifications from globally recognized institutions across the world, including, just I think more recently, the National Institute of Science and Technology in the US. And also more recently as well, you also received like ISO certification as well, right? So maybe you can share with your listeners, what is the importance of the certifications for you guys, and how does it help the business long term?
So when we talk about the AI, all this question is coming from the market itself. They are always questioning about how is your face verifications doing, how fast is it, how about the accuracy, and so on. And they also ask about how is the secure is it if we hit your server and you not use our data and you not selling our data. So that's why we have unfollowed receiving ISO 27001. That's regarding about the improving information security and management system. And also we have the certification about our AI. It's called NIST and FRVT. In participate NIST and FRVT certification, we success in entering the categories one-to-one verification, too-many identification, and presentation attack detection. From the three certification, it proved our technology to become the reliable services in Indonesia and the world also. The certification is a big factor for Verihubs to get and serving our big clients.
Really remarkable that you guys were able to, sort of put together all these different, like these three certifications that you talked about. I was curious to know, was there any learning from the whole process of getting those certifications? Was it just like an easy thing for you guys, or what was the experience like?
Actually, we need to create many policies and procedure. We have like hundreds procedures in our organization, so it's not really easy. And we also should be complete all the things. It's like you need to regularly change your password. You need to regularly see your data and put it in trash that you don't need to use it again. And there's so many things to be compliant. We also have to audit it in the 6 and 1 years regularly. Yeah, I think that's so strict, and it can be some of the parameters that we are compliant and fully put the security is an important things to us.
And so because of these certifications, I guess Verihubs was also able to mature as an organization, right? So it's not just about the product, right? Like the certification you also have to make sure that the internal controls and the organization is up to standards. And speaking of customers, maybe you can speak to what is one key piece of advice you would give to business leaders, right, when it comes to protecting their customers from fraud risk?
If we talk to the Verihubs side, always alert from all the sides to strengthen our system. Like I said before, we do implemented the ISO. And please don't put all the things or your company data just only in one person. You need it to pen testing is regularly, like that. And it's really important to reduce the potential events that you don't want to happen in the future.
The key takeaway I got is diversify sort of how you store data within your company, right? And what is another key piece of advice you would give to business leaders when it comes to, leveraging, again, going back to the whole data conversation, when it comes to tapping into, customer data or leveraging that to be able to boost like adoption, retention or conversion?
One of the most important advice is always put the things that what is really your clients need. Always listen to them. When you find out what the things that really important to them, the market, it will come to you. One of the most important advice is always from the product we offer as the best as possible according to the client request. That we consider market leaders. When the product is considered feasible, all businesses from the same country will compete by itself.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit from talking about the industry and sort of all these things that you've learned and how Verihubs has grown, to talk a little bit about your leadership approach, your management approach. So what has been your approach to driving more operational efficiency and performance management especially for, the BD or sales teams, which I think you're in charge of, right, as a COO. So what has been your approach, and is there anything that you've learned throughout your experience at Verihubs having to manage these teams?
From the CEO's perspective, of course, I should always counting about the time and the money itself. So for the BD team, we give them the flexibility because we know that the salesperson is more freely and they have the freedom. So we not strict them to always come to the office. It's only one time in a week they should come to the office. And then we also give them some of the budget to entertaining the clients. And we also track all the things that how many meetings that you can get the clients. Is it 3 times or 4 times? And how many spend you have burned for that client? So we can analyze it to, is it worth it to spend like 2 million to get the 100 million also on? All that should be calculated in our side.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting that, every person in the sales team has their own burn, and you sort of calculate the efficiency of that burn, right, with regards to what kind of sale they're able to make. And so on that note, I wanted to get into our hashtag Minute Masterclass corner where, we have our guests share some learnings from their experiences. And if you were to give a masterclass to, fellow BD professionals like yourself or entrepreneurs, like just starting out their own startup, when it comes to selling software, right, to enterprise clients, maybe even like institutions like, banks, what would be one key takeaway you would want these like students of your class to take away?
Okay, it's the thing that I learned from my BD part and also from our CEO that we should always listening to the clients. We should listening and understanding what they needed.
Can you give an example of that? An example of how that's applied?
I want all the participants can encourage the client. What is your really the real problem? Is it about the verification itself or is about the fraud? If they called it's about the fraud, how many fraud that you can achieve if you're not using that system? So you need to really encourage the client to get that kind of the information. After that, you can really know what is you sell to the clients. Besides you sell, I have this product, this is really good, you just use it. But you need to know it first, what is their pain point.
And I think that takes a lot of conversations as well. It's not something I guess that you find out in one meeting.
You cannot find out in one meeting, so you need to build a relation first to them,
right?
Make them trust on you, and you just can know their pain points.
On that note, I wanted to get into our rapid fire round, so a little bit less serious questions to wrap up our conversation. So the first one is, what digital technology or innovation excites you the most today?
Definitely AI. Because it's like GPT, AI, and ChatGPT. It's really impressive today. So we also update them because the AI things becoming more powerful. We also creating the AI, but for the security,
right?
We always increasing our products to tackle all the things that for becoming from fraud.
Right.
But it's really interesting.
Yeah, so you guys have to. You're saying that you guys have to keep up, right, with the developments that are happening. Looking back now, what is a skill? Could be a soft skill or hard skill that you think you should have learned back when you were a student.
I was a communication student before, art of communication, but I wish when I in the college that more the things is more practical, not just about the theoretical. Because when I was in the college, all the lectures is about the planning or the first strategy to communicate to the people. But I want to learn more about the maybe like 10 tips how to impress person in the first meeting, or how to negotiate and deals and close the deal in that time. Essentially,
right.
Yeah, I think it's important to the young people, especially BD for the nowadays in the career.
That's an interesting answer. If there's something that you could automate in your job just by wishing for it, what aspect of your role would that be?
I wish I can automate all the things, but actually that's the things that we do it right now. So all this data, we create a one system. It's like user conversion, and then the budgeting, finance things. We create it into the one system. So when we need to analyze the data, we can do it more easily. No focusing to make all the things more automatically. So we can be focus to the things that bigger to the business.
And that's something that you're doing now in Verihubs.
Yeah,
Right,
with
right,
the
right.
CEO and our data team.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean that is your expertise, right? So I think yeah, even internally, you guys would be able to come up with something. What is your favorite go-to destination in Southeast Asia, or what trip are you most looking forward to taking in the region?
Actually, I don't have much country that I have visited in Southeast Asia. I
Mhm.
only visit for the Bangkok and Singapore.
So
Yeah.
apart from Thailand and Singapore, like any other places that you wanted to
Oh,
visit?
maybe I think that's Vietnam because when we talking to others startup, they said Vietnam is more similar like Indonesia. So
Interesting, interesting. What's your favorite activity to de-stress? I know you're very busy as a mom and also a COO. So what do you do to take care of your mental health and also de-stress?
I do some gym and playing with my kids also. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's too long that because only thing is already checked.
Do you have any like book that you've read, maybe not recently, but before that you want to
Mm,
recommend to our listeners?
I'm not into the book right now, but actually I shifting it to the podcast. It's like
Okay. So any
or
podcast?
yeah, it's like that. I love to read about how to influence the people, how to becoming a good leader because I'm still processing too. Because the
Right, right,
family
right.
is more bigger now and I have more manager under me. So I need to know how to represent myself to become a CEO. So I keep learning from that.
Right, right. And on that note of continuously learning and continuously evolving yourself, I want to thank Vivi for coming on the show. Thank you for making the time and coming in prepared to share a lot of like different insights from learnings and also giving us an update on what Verihubs has been up to, right? And now you're definitely looking at a lot more use cases and also have all those certifications as well. It's great to see how that Verihubs has evolved as well, that you yourself have evolved also through the company, and looking forward to the progress that Verihubs will make in the coming months. So on that note, thank you so much again, Vivi, for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Rolo, to having me.